For 7 years, she poured coffee, flipped pancakes, and lived in the shadows of a small Idaho town. But when 3 black SUVs rolled into Rock Pine, the quiet waitress everyone thought they knew was forced to face the truth. Who was Lucia Marlowe really, and why did the Navy SEALs call her Specter? The first snow of December lay heavy over Rock Pine, Idaho, softening the edges of its truck stop diner and giving the neon open sign a faint glow in the night air. Inside, the warmth of frying bacon and black coffee mingled with the hum of diesel engines outside. Truckers shuffled in with their boots caked in slush, nodding at the familiar figure behind the counter. Lucia Marlowe, the woman who had poured their coffee for the last 7 years without ever giving away much of herself. Lucia's life was built on rhythm. Open at 6, close at 10, tips in the jar, rent in cash. She laughed when expected, kept conversations shallow, and never let anyone in. To most, she was a polite ghost haunting the truck stop. Reliable, quiet, always in the same faded green uniform dress Maureen Vargas insisted the waitresses wear. A silver chain with no pendant was the only personal accessory she ever allowed herself. The town had formed its own theories about her. Sheriff Tom Collins, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes, figured she was in witness protection. He saw the way she scanned exits, how she memorized license plates without writing them down. Maureen, the diner's owner, told anyone who asked that Lucia was just a woman burned by love, choosing silence over heartbreak. The truckers called her Moonlight for her pale skin and the way she seemed to slip away the second her shift ended. But none of them were right. Behind the modest trailer she rented, down a steel hatch obscured by a tarp and stacked firewood, lay the truth. Every Sunday, when the diner was closed, Lucia descended the ladder into a world no one in Rock Pine could imagine. The bunker smelled faintly of oil and gunmetal. Racks of suppressed rifles lined the walls. Ammunition crates bore markings scrubbed clean but recognizable to her eyes. On a reinforced table sat a disassembled SIG Sauer pistol, cleaned with ritual precision. At the far end, a bank of encrypted comms gear blinked quietly, linked to satellites she still had clearance codes for. There, she was not Lucia. She was Specter. 7 years earlier, in Somalia, her unit had been ambushed during a black operation no government ever admitted existed. The mission was supposed to extract a defector with vital intelligence. Instead, it became a massacre. She remembered fire in the streets, the endless rattle of AK-47s, and the voice of her brother, Alex, screaming her name before the comms cut out. In the aftermath, Specter had been declared Kia. Her file was sealed, her name buried. Only one person knew she had survived, and she had sworn never to contact him again. And so she became the ghost waitress of Rock Pine. Every night after her shift, Lucia would walk the short distance home, snow crunching beneath her boots. Sheriff Collins sometimes offered her a ride, but she always declined. In truth, she trusted no one. She would check her trailer windows for reflections of a tail, her fingers tightening on the concealed knife strapped to her thigh. In the bunker, she practiced drills, breach entries, tactical reloads, knife disarms. Her body never forgot, even if the town thought she had grown soft. Still, Rock Pine began to grow around her. Sheriff Collins would linger at the counter, asking about her day. Maureen pressed her to join Sunday dinners. Truckers told her stories from the road, laughing too loud and leaving her with smiles she never admitted mattered. For fleeting moments, she let herself believe the lie, that she could live as Lucia, that Specter had truly died. Yet even in those moments, when Maureen's laughter filled the diner or Collins's eyes lingered with quiet hope, she felt like an intruder in her own skin, an actress reciting lines in a play that wasn't hers. But the nightmares never loosened. Some nights she woke drenched in sweat, Alex's voice echoing, the gunfire replaying. She would sit in the dark, staring at her go-bag by the door. Body armor folded neat, cash in multiple currencies, passports under different names. It was always ready. That December morning, as she poured Collins his usual black coffee, he studied her with the same steady gaze he used when sizing up suspects. "You ever think about moving on from this place?" he asked. Lucia kept her smile polite. Rock pine suits me. 7 years is a long time to stay in one spot, Lucia. She slid the coffee pot back to the burner. Maybe I like routine, but her heart had already quickened. 7 years was too long. Any operative knew that standing still made you a target. She told herself Collins was just fishing, the way he always did, but unease threaded through her chest. Later that night, after her shift ended, she walked home beneath the swirl of snow. At the edge of town, the sound of a distant engine reached her, too low, too precise. She paused, narrowing her eyes at the highway beyond the truck stop. A convoy, 3 SUVs, no plates she recognized. The vehicles slowed before disappearing into the forest road north of Rock Pine. Lucia's breath fogged the air. To anyone else, it was nothing. To her, it was formation driving, military tight spacing. Whoever they were, they weren't tourists. She stood frozen in the dark, pulse steadying in the way only Specter's training could. She walked home faster that night, boots crunching in rhythm with her thoughts. In her trailer, she locked the door, then opened the hatch to the bunker. She sat at the comms desk, fingers brushing the cold steel of her sidearm. Lights blinked back at her as if mocking her choice to hide all these years. In Rock Pine, they thought she was just the woman who served pancakes. But deep down, Lucia knew. The lie was ending. Specter's world was coming back for her. By morning, Rock Pine was buzzing with whispers. The 3 black SUVs that had slipped in under the cover of night hadn't gone unnoticed. Truckers swapping stories at Maureen's diner swore they had seen men in dark coats walking the outskirts of town. Some thought they were federal agents, others said bounty hunters. Sheriff Collins parked his cruiser longer than usual outside the diner windows, scanning the road as if expecting trouble. Lucia served coffee with the same calm precision she always had, but her eyes cataloged everything. A sedan idling too long at the pump. A stranger at the corner booth pretending to read a newspaper but flipping pages too slowly. The bell above the door jingled, and 2 men entered, tourists by appearance only. The first wore a brand new flannel shirt, too crisp to have seen a wash. His boots were spotless, his posture too straight. The second had a baseball cap pulled low, but when he reached for the menu, Lucia saw the small scar on the inside of his wrist, a tactical injury she recognized from knife drills. They sat across from each other, their casual chatter punctuated by the occasional glance at the exits. Lucia approached with her pad. "Coffee?" "Sure," the one in the cap said, voice clipped. His accent was East Coast, but he tried too hard to round it into something neutral. As she poured, the crisp flannel man asked without looking up, "So, been here long?" Lucia's hand stilled for only half a second. A trucker wouldn't have noticed, but Collins, sitting at the counter, caught it. 7 years, she said smoothly, placing the cups down. 7 years, the man repeated, as though he were verifying a file in his head. Small towns keep secrets, huh? Lucia smiled faintly, then walked away, her mind already running scenarios. They weren't locals. They weren't lost. They were probing. By the time lunch rolled around, the diner had filled with chatter and the hiss of the griddle. Maureen Vargas, bustling at the register, leaned toward Lucia when she passed by with plates. "Strange day. I don't like the look of those 2. "They'll be gone by nightfall," Lucia answered, though she didn't believe it. At 2 o'clock sharp, the bell rang again. The cold swept in, and the conversations at the tables faltered. A man stepped inside, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a navy peacoat with the collar turned up. His eyes scanned the room like he had memorized every angle before setting foot across the threshold. Lucia felt her chest tighten. Commander Jason Remy. It was impossible not to recognize him. 7 years hadn't dulled the hard lines of his jaw or the military cut of his hair. He moved with the same precision as on the Somali streets where they had last stood shoulder to shoulder. But all Lucia remembered in that moment was his voice shouting orders that pulled the unit away, leaving her in the chaos, leaving Alex to die. Jason ignored the stares and made straight for her counterstool. Collins rose instinctively, his badge gleaming under the lights. "Afternoon, Sheriff," Jason said evenly, offering no hand. His gaze settled on Lucia. Specter. The name cut through the diner like a gunshot. Collins froze. The truckers exchanged confused looks. Only Maureen laughed nervously, thinking it was some old nickname. Lucia forced her hand to stay steady as she set down a plate of pancakes in front of another customer. "You've got the wrong person," she murmured. Jason leaned in. His voice was low enough only she could hear. "We don't have time for this. Someone's hunting the unit. 3 dead already. You're next." A chill spread through her chest, sharp and merciless. She slipped behind the counter, grabbed a coffee pot, and used the act of refilling cups as cover for her racing mind. "Why are you here, Jason?" "Because the man behind it is Hollings. He's selling off black files, names, locations, covers. He's auctioning you to the highest bidder." Lucia's jaw tightened. Admiral Hollings had once commanded respect, the architect of operations whispered about even in intelligence circles. If he was selling out agents, then no one was safe. Jason's eyes softened for only a flicker. "Alex isn't in those files." For the first time since stepping through the door, his voice carried guilt, as if he had rehearsed 100 things to say to her, and all of them had collapsed into that single sentence. The name hit her like a blade. "He's dead." Jason hesitated, and in that hesitation, something dangerous bloomed. Doubt. Before she could press, the tourists rose from their booth, dropping bills on the table. They didn't look at the register. They looked at Jason. One tapped his ear as though signaling. Then they walked out without finishing their coffee. Jason stood. "We need to move. They weren't watching me. They were watching you." Collins's hand hovered near his holster. "Someone explain what the hell's going on." Lucia kept her face unreadable, but her heart pounded. For years she had lived in silence, but in a single afternoon the world she had buried came clawing back into daylight. Jason didn't wait for permission. He opened the diner door, the winter air biting sharp. "We've got a convoy outside town. You want to live, you come with me now." Lucia looked at Collins, at Maureen, at the truckers who thought she was just another broken woman running from a past best left untold. For 7 years, she had played that part so well she almost believed it herself. But Jason's arrival tore the mask from her face. Specter was no longer a ghost. She had been marked. And as the door swung shut behind Jason, Lucia realized her life as a waitress had just ended. By nightfall, Rock Pine no longer felt like Rock Pine. The small town that usually quieted after dusk was crawling with strangers. Locals noticed vehicles they didn't recognize idling in parking lots, silhouettes smoking in alleys, and an unsettling silence on roads usually filled with the drone of trucks. Word traveled fast. Something was happening, and it centered on the woman everyone thought was just a waitress. Lucia stayed in the shadows of her trailer, watching headlights slice across the snow. Jason Remy's words looped in her mind. 3 dead already. You're next. She had spent years preparing for the day her cover would crack. But living it was different. It wasn't just her life at risk now. Collins had seen too much. Maureen had already been brushed by danger when those tourists asked questions. Rock Pine itself was becoming collateral. The pounding on her door came just after 10. 3 sharp raps, controlled. Not hostile. "Lucia, it's me." She opened cautiously. Jason stood there, snow melting on his coat. Another figure just behind him. Specialist Rivera, a young man barely 30 with restless dark eyes and a laptop bag slung across his shoulder. "He's our comms lead," Jason said. "Rivera can break the encryption Hollings is using, but we need a base of operations. Yours will do." Lucia's instinct flared, but she led them down into the bunker. Rivera froze halfway down the ladder, staring wide-eyed at the armory. "You weren't kidding," he muttered. Jason gave him a look. Eyes on the mission. Lucia ignored their dynamic, focusing on the maps she'd kept folded in a weatherproof case. Forest trails, old service roads, fire breaks, routes no outsider could know. She spread them across the steel table. "We're boxed in if we stay here," she said. "SUVs north. Watchers at the south road. Hollings wants me alive long enough to auction my file. That means he'll squeeze the town until I show." Jason nodded. They'll use leverage. Civilians first. As if conjured by his words, Lucia's phone buzzed against the metal. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Marlowe? The voice was smooth, rehearsed. We have something of yours. In the background, she heard muffled crying. Maureen's voice, strained. Don't, please. Lucia's hand tightened on the phone. If you touch her, relax. She'll stay unharmed. Unless you decide to run. Then we won't need her anymore. Instructions will follow. The line went dead. Jason swore under his breath. Rivera had already opened his laptop, pulling up intercepted signals. That call bounced off a military-grade relay. These guys aren't freelancers. Hollings is running this with full infrastructure. Lucia felt the weight press in. Maureen, who had given her a job, defended her to nosy locals, and treated her like family, was now a pawn in a game she had hoped to avoid forever. Collins arrived minutes later, barging into the trailer uninvited. His face was red with fury, but his eyes carried something deeper: betrayal. You lied to me, Lucia. To everyone. Lucia kept her voice calm. It kept you alive. Alive? My town's crawling with mercenaries. Maureen's missing. And you're telling me it was for our safety? He jabbed a finger at Jason. And who the hell is he? Jason didn't flinch. The man trying to keep her breathing. You too, Sheriff, if you'll step aside. Collins's jaw worked, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he stared at Lucia, searching her face for the woman he thought he knew. You could have told me. For a heartbeat, his anger wavered into something else. Hurt. He had built quiet dreams around her, of dinners that never happened, of a life that could have been. And all of it had been a lie. Her silence was answer enough. Rivera interrupted, eyes glued to his screen. Got a trace. The call originated from an uplink near the old sawmill. Remote enough for a holding site, but I need clearance codes to break deeper. He glanced up at Lucia. I've seen traces of the Marlowe clearance buried in legacy systems. There are old access protocols tied to Marlowe files. If Alex's codes are still active, I can force my way in. The name hit her like a blow, forcing the air from her lungs. What did you just say? Rivera hesitated. I shouldn't have said that. My father, he served with Alex Marlowe in early intel operations. Before Somalia, I grew up hearing his name. When I joined Remy's team, I recognized yours. That's why I came. Jason shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. Lucia gripped the edge of the table. Alex, her brother, the wound that had never healed. If Rivera's father had worked with him, then maybe Jason's hesitation earlier hadn't been empty. Maybe Alex wasn't as dead as she believed. The moment shattered as gunfire erupted outside, short, controlled bursts. The trailer windows rattled. Collins dove for cover, drawing his sidearm. Contact! Jason barked. Lucia moved on instinct, yanking open a weapons crate. She tossed Rivera a Kevlar vest, slung a suppressed rifle across her shoulder, and pulled Jason toward the ladder. We use the forest trails. They'll pin us if we stay. They burst into the night, snow crunching beneath boots, shadows moving between headlights. Lucia fired 2 clean shots, dropping silhouettes advancing near the diner. Collins returned fire, cursing under his breath, torn between rage at her deception and the instinct to survive the firefight. The town had become a battlefield. Rock Pine's peace was gone, swallowed by the clash of 2 worlds, the quiet life Lucia had built and the violent one coming to claim her. As they disappeared into the forest cover, the smoke of burning tires rising behind them, Lucia knew one truth. Maureen's life, Alex's fate, Collins's trust, Rivera's secrets. It was all converging. And Specter, whether she liked it or not, was back in command. The sea was black glass under the winter moon. At the bow, Specter scanned the horizon through night vision goggles. Ahead rose Hollings's floating fortress, too massive and armored to be a pleasure craft. The intelligence auction was already underway. Encrypted bursts filled Rivera's laptop, the data spilling across his screen. They're transmitting classified profiles right now, he whispered over the comms. If we don't cut it off here, every covert operative on that list is burned. Jason's voice was steady. We breach from the port side. Rivera stays with the relay. Specter leads inside. Collins, he glanced at the sheriff, strapped into borrowed body armor, rifle awkward in his hands. You cover our exit. No cowboy moves. Collins scowled but nodded. He wasn't here for command. He was here because Maureen's life was on the line. The Zodiac touched the steel flank. Grappling hooks, ropes, then they climbed. Lucia rolled into a crouch on deck, rifle sweeping corners, nerves razor-sharp. They moved quick and silent, shadows slipping into shadows. Guards patrolled in tight pairs, their gear high-grade, their movements drilled. Hollings hadn't hired amateurs. He'd recruited killers who knew what Specter was capable of. At the cargo bay doors, Rivera jacked into a panel, fingers flying. Sparks hissed, circuits overloading. 30 seconds. Lucia checked her watch. 30 seconds was too long. She motioned Jason and Collins into cover, then pulled a flashbang from her belt. The doors parted just as she tossed it inside. White light and sound ripped through the bay, dropping 2 guards before they could react. She was in before the echoes faded, rifle snapping twice. Clear. Maureen sat bound, fear on her tear-streaked face. Lucia cut the ropes. You're safe now, she whispered. Maureen clutched her arm. Why you? Why all this? Lucia had no answer she could give. Instead, she pressed the knife into Maureen's hands. Stay close to Collins. Don't let go. Jason signaled upward. Auction's top deck. Hollings will be there. They climbed narrow stairwells slick with condensation, gunfire breaking out in bursts as they cleared each level. Rivera's updates crackled in their ears, data streams shutting down one by one under his attack. The bidders were panicking, their encrypted feeds collapsing. At the command deck, Lucia kicked the doors open. The room was lit by monitors and the pale blue wash of projection screens. Men in tailored suits scattered, shouting into dead comms. At the center, Admiral Hollings stood like a statue carved from arrogance, his uniform jacket pristine, his hands clasped behind his back. You never did know when to stay buried, Specter, he said calmly, as though greeting an old acquaintance. Lucia leveled her rifle. Where is Alex? A smile touched his lips. He gestured, and from a side room 2 guards dragged a man into view. Shackled, gaunt, his beard streaked with gray, but unmistakably him. Alex Marlowe. The sight knocked the air from her lungs, leaving her weightless and unmoored. Alive, Hollings said smoothly. For now. He's been useful leverage. But I can't have 2 Marlowes tearing down my empire. Jason's rifle came up, but Hollings stepped behind Alex, a pistol pressing to his temple. Lower it, Commander, or your ghost story ends messy. Lucia's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. You built your power on selling lives, on selling our lives. You think you control this auction, but I'm the one you miscalculated. You should have left me in Somalia. Hollings sneered. I did. The standoff fractured in an instant. Rivera's hack detonated the yacht's internal comms. Alarms blared, systems shorted. The lights cut out. In the chaos, Lucia lunged forward. Her knife flashed, knocking Hollings's weapon aside. Alex dropped to his knees as Jason tackled 1 guard. Collins fired, his bullet punching through the second. Lucia grappled Hollings, rage lending her strength. She drove him against the console, knife at his throat. You're finished, she hissed. Hollings spat blood. End me here and the buyers vanish into the dark. But expose me, and you'll burn every bridge they thought was safe. She tightened her grip, then stopped. Killing him would silence 1 man. Exposing him would destroy the network. Jason met her eyes across the chaos, and for once there was no command in his stare, only relief. He had carried the guilt of Somalia for 7 years, and in that moment, handing Hollings over alive felt like the redemption neither of them had dared hope for. With a shove, she slammed him into Jason's custody. We take him alive. Rivera, stream this. The world sees Hollings for what he is. Rivera's fingers flew, broadcasting the Admiral's confession across every bidder's feed. The suits screamed, their fortunes collapsing in real time. Minutes later, the SEAL convoy swept the yacht, securing survivors, cuffing Hollings. Lucia knelt by Alex, cutting his restraints. His eyes searched hers, broken but alive. "You didn't stop looking." Her words trembled, the iron edge of her voice finally breaking. "I never stopped hearing you." Maureen was pulled to safety. Collins, blood on his sleeve, looked at Lucia with something between relief and grief. "Guess I never knew you at all." Lucia stood on deck as dawn broke. The mask of Lucia Marlowe was gone, yet she realized she didn't have to choose. Specter and Lucia could exist together. Alex was alive, Jason's team at her side, and Rock Pine still hers to protect. The world would remember the night Hollings fell. In the quiet between gunfire and sunrise, Lucia chose to remember pancakes, Maureen's laugh, and the promise of starting again. This time no longer in hiding, but in honesty. Yet honesty carried its own price, forcing her to bear both names for the rest of her life. Could anyone else have walked that line? This story makes us reflect on identity, loyalty, and the cost of living two lives. Would you have chosen peace or stepped back into the shadows, like Lucia did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story gripped you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more powerful tales. See you in the next video.